Now, the last time that we built an Intel gaming PC, it didn't actually go that well. Even though we built a system that was reasonably cheap, it was actually on the lower end of budget nowadays, the performance was absolutely shocking. So we thought we'd give Intel another go with some extra parts. We're going to up the budget and we're going to build something that I'm going to call affordable, and hopefully it will be quite capable too. So the system that we're going to build today is an all Intel gaming PC. We can do that now because obviously they make graphics cards, or at least gaming graphics cards. It's not going to be the cheapest system that you can actually build. We've done that before in the past and it didn't go well. But we're going to actually use some budget parts and we're going to put together what I think would be quite an affordable PC, but something that looks really nice. The first thing that we're going to be building into this system is of course the motherboard, and for that we're going to be using this. This is an MSI Pro H610ME. It is on the lower end of what you would classify as a budget board. It's going to have some cheaper VRMs, it's going to have less features, but it is a micro ATX board that is more than capable for pretty much any CPU that you want. You can actually install into these anything from an i3 12100 all the way up to a 14900K, so that's pretty impressive for a board, although you probably wouldn't want to go that high, and obviously we're not going to be doing that today. But this is the board that we're going to be using. It is also a DDR4 board, so you'll make a little bit saving if you were to actually build this system, because your RAM is going to be of course a lot cheaper. Going into this board is of course a CPU, and for that we've decided to go for this one. This is the i5 12600KF. Of course you are missing the graphics on this one, but it's okay because we're going to be installing a gaming graphics card anyway. And these can be found at the moment for an absolute bargain price. I managed to pick this one up for around £150, which is not bad for a CPU that has 10 cores. And is more than capable of playing pretty much any game out there today on the market, depending on the graphics card that you pair with it. This is of course an LGA 1700 processor and will pair with our motherboard perfectly fine. All we need to do is take the CPU and drop it into there, just like that. Close the lid, click it down to get your plastic off, drop your little arm, and that CPU is good to go. For the RAM on this build, we're going to be going with these. These are 2 sticks of 8GB, so making a total of 16GB. You don't really need that much more for gaming, particularly at the tier that we're building here. And to be honest, you can pretty much use any RAM you want. It is 3000 MHz DDR4, so it'll match perfectly with the system that we're building. These are from XPG, and I just really like the look of them. Every system of course needs storage, and we've gone with this from XPG as well. It kind of matches the RAM and I think it looks pretty cool. It is an RGB M.2 drive and it is only a 512GB, but that's going to be perfectly fine for our operating system plus a bunch of games. If you wanted to expand the storage on this motherboard, you could easily do it via SATA drives. It's got plenty of ports for that, and they're usually a little bit cheaper too, so that would probably be the route that I would go. Now with our motherboard building up, before we get to the actual graphics card that we're going to be using, we do need obviously a cooler because that CPU didn't come with one. And for that we're going to be using this. This was actually sent to us across by our friends at Arctic. It is the Liquid Freezer 360 ARGB in white. It is a pretty decent cooler. It's probably more than enough for this CPU, but I thought we were going to use this because when we get to the case, it'll all make sense. Before we actually start putting the motherboard and everything into a case, we have to actually make a slight modification to it because these coolers actually come with their own contact plates when it comes to LGA 1700. So we'll need to get that out, make sure we fit it to the board and get all the cooler system actually mounted to it. With everything installed on our motherboard, it's time to take a look at our case, and for that we've chosen this. This is the SaharaGaming M808W. Very weird naming from that company, but they do produce pretty decent cases, to be honest. This is a micro ATX fish tank style dual chamber case, and it's actually a pretty decent quality. We have looked at it in the past on the channel. Just take these thumb screws out the side here, drop this glass off, and then you can take a look inside. We have plenty of space in this case for the motherboard that we've chosen, and we have also fully fitted it out with SaharaGaming's latest Mirror 12 fans. Now the fans that actually came with this case are in a slightly different configuration to what you buy. The 3 fans at the bottom, which are all fully modular by the way, so you're going to really cut down on cables for this build, are actually reversible bladed, so they will be drawing air in even though you can see the tops of them. All of the others are actually exhaust fans. They're all modular as well, so they are all clicked together. We're going to have 2 in the back here. We're going to have 3 across the top, which we are going to swap onto the radiator. So we're going to replace those Arctic fans, and then we're going to have 1 in the back. So what we need to do is remove those fans out the top, get them installed onto the radiator, and then get that motherboard in. Now with the motherboard installed and pretty much all of the fans actually hooked up, we of course need a power supply, and for that I'm going to be using this. This is a Fractal Design ION Plus 560p. In terms of wattage, it's more than enough for the system that we're going to be putting together, and it is actually fantastic quality. If you've had a chance to take a look at the Fractal Design power supplies, you'll know that they're quality throughout. It is an 80 plus platinum power supply, and you know you should never actually skimp on a power supply, so this is actually going to be a decent unit for this build. You could pretty much go for any brand you want though. It's just that this is one that we had around and I really wanted to use it. So we've pretty much got the whole system together now, except for one part. It doesn't make an all Intel PC unless we have a graphics card from Intel, and for that we're going to be using this. This is the Intel Arc A750. It is a more than capable graphics card, even though it does only have 8 GB of RAM, and they've been touch and go since their actual release due to mainly driver issues. The hardware itself is perfectly fine, but of course we're going to be dropping that into this system, and it's actually going to pair really nicely with that CPU. To install the card is pretty simple. We just need to take it out of the box, whip the little card off the back there, and we just slot it into the system. It is a bit of a shame that Intel don't actually make a white graphics card, but I've only got their LE models and they only seem to do them in black, but I think it actually looks nice with the black on white build anyway, so it's going to kind of go in with that theming. Maybe I should install some kind of white cable extensions just to kind of finish it off. Maybe I'll do that later, but for now that system is working perfectly fine. There is one thing that we still need to install, and that is of course the top for our all-in-one cooler. These Arctic ones do come with a separate fan piece. This actually keeps all your VRMs and everything cool, which probably isn't necessary on this motherboard, but I think it's going to look pretty cool anyway. All we need to do is just drop it into here, and the magnets will actually keep it down just like that. Now I think the system actually looks pretty awesome, and it's actually quite well balanced throughout. The white really does make it pop a little bit. It is a shame about the graphics card being in that color, but I think you could kind of live with it, particularly if you're going for that kind of theme. When the lighting is on this case, particularly with all of these fans, it looks absolutely amazing. I think that for anybody out there that is a big RGB fan, you're really going to have a good time, even though with this amount of fans it could actually be classed as a little bit noisy. They're all running at full speed at the moment. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but it can generate quite a bit of noise. But of course you would actually set some decent fan curves. But apart from that, I think the system looks fantastic. How much would this kind of system cost you though? Well, to actually build this system right here at today's prices, I actually calculated it at roughly around £700 to £800. Is that absolutely worth it? Maybe. In terms of looks, it does look fantastic and it's all going to go well together for a while. But what happens when you take a look at the performance? Intel have not been the best known for their graphics card performance, particularly with driver issues. So we did some testing on this system just to kind of see what you would get. Now in the older titles like Back 4 Blood, you're going to get a pretty decent experience here. We kind of limited this system here to a 1080p resolution, and when running that game in 1080p with a high preset, you'll get an average of 164 frames per second with a 1% low of 82. That is of course a high FPS experience, and the game looked fantastic too. Another slightly older game that we tested was Control. That game actually looks fantastic in pretty much any setting, but we did run it at 1080p with a high setting, and we managed to get an average of 74 frames per second with a 1% low of 57. Now that is not the greatest performance there, particularly on those 1% lows. You're not getting a full 60 FPS experience, but I'm kind of assuming that this is where the Intel Arc graphics cards kind of do have their ups and downs, because they don't fully work 100% with every single game. But of course that is still a playable experience, and that game was always quite demanding. One of the games that really shows this system in a very good light is of course Doom Eternal. Running the game in 1080p with an ultra nightmare setting where it looked absolutely fantastic, we managed to get an average of 184 frames per second with a 1% low of 143. That means that the game is of course way more than playable, and you could bump that game up to 1440p in a high setting with no problem at all. You could probably actually run that game on this system in 4K and still get a pretty decent 60 FPS experience, even with ultra high settings. So I don't think you're going to have any problem here playing that kind of game if that's the game that you like. Moving up to a much newer title, you can see where this Intel Arc graphics card and combination really does start to show its age now a little bit. In Horizon Forbidden West, running at 1080p with a high preset, we managed to get an average of 61 frames per second with a 1% low 49. To even get that close, we had to actually enable XeSS with a quality setting, and even then it wasn't the smoothest of gameplays, so I don't think that would be a title that you're really going to rush out to play on a system like this. I think this game is a good demonstration where Intel need to actually continue on improving their drivers, because as you start to look at even newer titles, the cards don't seem to perform as well as others from other brands. Spider-Man Remastered was a perfectly fine game to play on this system, particularly in a 1080p with a high preset. We managed to get an average of 108 frames per second with a 1% low of 61. That of course gives you a very smooth 60 FPS experience with a little bit of a touch at those averages in the high FPS range. Another game that actually worked perfectly fine on this system with a little bit of help from some kind of software was The Last of Us Part 1. This game is very demanding on all kinds of hardware, so actually having a little bit of help from something really helps this system. We ran the game in a 1080p with a high preset and it didn't perform that great, but when enabling FSR 3 with a quality setting and enabling frame generation, we pretty much managed to bump it up to a pretty decent experience. With these settings, you're going to see an average of 99 frames per second with a 1% low of 54. That just meant that the game was perfectly fine to play, it was reasonably smooth, and to be honest, it was a pretty decent experience. So that begs the question, can you actually build an affordable all Intel gaming PC that will pretty much play any game? Well, you can actually build one, but it's going to cost you a little bit to do. I think you could actually get a much better system if you went with AMD, to be honest, for the same price. We actually recently built one for around the same price as this system, and to be honest, it would smoke this one. It would absolutely blow it out of the water. I think the major bottleneck in this system is that Intel Arc graphics card. They are starting to age a little bit now, and they didn't really have the best start. They performed okay for the prices at the time, but to be honest, most Intel fans now are waiting for the next generation, which should be coming along soon. Hopefully we'll be able to build a system out of their latest generation as well, and we'll be able to compare with something like this, see if you can actually do it on the next generation. But apart from that, the system looks nice, it's just probably not something you'd want to build for that kind of money. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this system. Have you built an all Intel gaming PC and is it perfectly fine for you? What do you think of the system that we've built here? Does it actually look pretty decent, or are you a non-RGB kind of fan? I know a lot of you out there are. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. We've still got plenty more builds to do on the channel, and I think you're going to be impressed with some of them that are coming forward. And I'm sure, as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.